Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for My WIT Radio, brought to you by Women in Technology. Now here's your host, Tricia Stezzi.
We are here. I'm so excited. This is one of my favorite things I do each month. Today we are going to be speaking with Nancy Teaster, a female leader that I admire very much. I can't wait to hear about her story. But before we kick off with this interview, let's just mention why we're here, which is because Women in Technology, and our mission is to empower girls and women to excel in STEAM from the classroom to the boardroom. And so I'm the host here today because I am the volunteer program director for WIT Forums, which I am very excited to say that our next WIT Forum, which is next Wednesday, we're sold out. So you got to move fast around here if you want to come out to breakfast and mingle with the tech leadership in Atlanta and learn from the best. So this week we're going to be doing the road to the C-suite. So this is a great kickoff to that. We've got an amazing leader here today. And so in my day job, I feel like there's a nice connection to what we'll be talking about today. I actually have a company called Significance, and what we do is engage people and create value for clients by engaging people around purpose. And I'm just a real believer, and this is one reason I love volunteering with WIT, is that diversity, purpose, and technology. When you combine those things, not only do you get success in business, but we can solve some of the greatest challenges in the world. So I love when that combination comes together. And for the many business people listening out here today, I know you know that disengagement is expensive. So engagement is something we all strive for, and we're going to hear a lot about that today. So with that, let's kick off this interview and get into the meat of this. So as I mentioned, my guest today is Nancy Teaster. She is the SVP and GM of Strategic Operations for Verint Customer Engagement Solutions at Verint Systems. She's got 30 years of high-tech software industry experience, many leadership roles. So I know she is going to share a lot of wisdom, especially for the female listeners out there, about how they might reach these levels in industry as well. So with that, let me ask my first question to Nancy. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do at Verint, and so that will give us some context for our interview? I would love to hear some backstory.
Sure. And maybe I'll even start a little bit with what Verint does.
Okay, great.
Because that'll put a context into it as well. So as you said, we're focused on engagement as well. Yeah. Our focus is to deliver technology to companies so that they can manage their customer engagements. Mm-hmm. So most organizations are very focused on creating a better customer experience, but also, unfortunately, trying to balance that with cost. And so all the technologies that we offer are in that sweet spot of how do they help raise the customer experience, but also help the organization balance cost. Within that, as you said, I'm the GM of Strategic Operations, and that is a combination of a multitude of things. I run global marketing, our strategic alliances, and several of our business units as well, which means that I spend a lot of time in acquisitions, M&A, but also a lot of time with our customers and our partners, which is an important part of how we go to market. Mm-hmm. Our largest office is here in Alpharetta. We're headquartered out of New York, but our largest office for the Customer Engagement Solutions group is Alpharetta. So this is a great place for us to look for new associates and help make sure people know who Verint is.
Amazing. And also I know that within this work that you do in engagement and, efficiencies around that, there's a lot of AI involved.
There is.
So maybe we can dig into that a little bit later, but let's first start with, your journey as a leader in the industry, which, is, somewhat rare to have a female, in the leadership. And what I find is so, kind of crazy about that is that, there's so much research out there showing that when there's diversity in leadership, especially gender, the companies outperform. So I feel like wherever you have been in your leadership roles, they're lucky to have had you, because I'm sure those results have been amazing. But can you share, like, what has your journey been like? How did you get to where you are?
Well, thank you for asking. I think a lot of our journeys all start with how we're raised. So I grew up in Macon, Georgia.
Yeah.
So south of here, about an hour and a half. Both my parents went to Emory. And I would say I have one sister who's 1 year younger than me. And I would say that it was never a topic of any discussion at our house that as girls we were expected to perform or have any different kind of, careers or life expectations than boys did. I don't think either one of my parents had ever crossed their mind. Never even remember having a discussion about that. So we either ignored the topic completely, I'm not sure which, or my parents just were oblivious to the fact that there might be some limitations because we were girls. Awesome. Because of that, I wanted to be an architect. And so, I applied at Auburn in Georgia and Georgia Tech. And my senior year of high school, my dad pulled me aside, and he was always very supportive, very, I'd say pushed us a lot, but at the same time pushed us in the directions we wanted to go in. But he said, Nancy, I think the future is computers. And I think you need to second guess this whole architecture thing and really think about going into computers. And I thought, okay, well, this is kind of rare for him to push his way into something like that. So he took me to his office. They had just bought a mini computer. This was a huge deal. Think about this. This is 36 years ago. They had just bought a mini computer.
Visionaries.
And this was a huge deal. So he took me there. They had hired somebody to manage this computer they had put in their office, made me spend the day with the guy. Yeah. I thought, okay, well, I don't know, but okay. Why not? I'll try it. Right. So I changed my major at Georgia Tech to computer science, and decided to go to Georgia Tech and decided to be a computer science major. I was a computer science major for 2 years, and then I switched to business and to accounting. Happens to be in Atlanta at the time. This is 1984. One of the largest technology companies in Atlanta was an accounting software company. So they recruited heavily out of Georgia Tech, as you can imagine. And so I was fortunate enough to get a job at Management Science America, or MSA, and worked in the support organization services organization for accounting software. But I also think that was another advantage that I had. That company hired a lot of women. Okay. They had a lot of women in leadership roles. I remember walking around and thinking, look at her. She's, doing X, Y, and Z. Never once again crossed my mind that you couldn't be extremely successful to be a woman. But I think I got fortunate because I got into a company where that was the kind of business that they were in. I feel sorry to interject, but I feel like that is such a great example of, if you can see it, you can be it. It really helps to see role models that look like you, and you have that experience, and now here you are. So isn't that amazing? I agree 100% with that. I really do. Yeah. But I also think one of the other really important, things that I didn't notice until a couple of years into my career was it's also about what you're looking for. So, this goes a little bit to advice to young women, but I can still remember one day, a few years into my career there, coming out of a meeting with a friend of mine. She was a female and she was about my age. And she said to me, "Can you believe that guy said that to me, spoke to me that way because I was a woman?" And I remember thinking, no, he spoke to you that way because what you said was stupid. but she was looking at it like somehow she was being attacked because you're a woman. And honestly, didn't even cross my mind in the meeting that she had been, targeted in any way. So I am sure somewhere in my career, I have had, things happen to me because I was a woman, but I'm oblivious. So I also think it's what you're looking for. If you're looking for a fight, you're going to find one. That's what people say. I think if you think about yourself as a person and as a capable person and as just as good as everybody else, and that you expect to get the promotion just as much as you'd expect to get the promotion, and you're not looking to be pushed down, I think that attitude adds to your ability to be successful.
I think that's a really great point because it's pointing to actual confidence, and that comes intrinsically, and someone doesn't need to give that to you as a gift, right? It's like you just knew who you were and were able to carry that through in your business.
Yeah. It makes a difference if you're walking around waiting on something bad to happen, or if you're walking around assuming that the good things are going to happen. I do think attitude and confidence make a big difference.
I totally agree. And it's almost like you have a choice where you can envision the future or the life you want. And so pay attention to that, because if you're doing it unconsciously, then you might create some negative outcomes. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So it sounds like to me you had a really excellent upbringing in the sense of this, neutrality. I feel like I had that as well. I always played sports and all of that. So I feel like that was helpful, if you will, to just be encouraged to do what you want to do in life, and anybody can do anything they want. And so I'm not surprised that with that going for you, you went forward and pursued your interest, and here you are. And so through this career where, you started in architecture and moved into computer science, did you have mentors that were part of that journey that you want to talk about? How was that an influence for you?
So that's actually the second half of my story. So
okay.
Very good lead in.
We're in sync.
Yeah, very good lead in. So I was working at MSA, and I started in their services group, then moved to the pre-sales team, then managed the pre-sales team. But part of moving into pre-sales was, I was assigned to the government healthcare group, and the regional vice president of that group was a man named Dave Gould, who's in technology here in Atlanta today, part of a VC firm that invests in technology companies. And so I was part of his team, so to speak, and continued in the region, working in pre-sales, then eventually managing the pre-sales team. And Dave went over to our corporate office and started to run one of our divisions. And so he tapped me on the shoulder and said, I want you to come over here and run product management for this division. I was like, I don't know anything about product management. No, you'll be great. You come do it. So I did it. So worked for him for quite a while as well in our corporate office. He left and went to Boston actually to be the CEO of a company there. One day I got a call from a venture capital firm out of Boston. They were investing in a technology company here in Atlanta. And they said, we're looking for a VP of marketing in Atlanta for this small technology company we're investing in, and Dave Gould has given us your name. So I wasn't even looking for a job at the time, but I interviewed, and I took the VP of marketing job at Witness Systems, which it was then bought by Verint, which is how I'm in the role I'm in at Verint today. So mentors do make a difference. One day I was at Witness. I'd been there a couple of years, and the board called me and said, we're letting the CEO go. And I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I've got the wherewithal to train a new CEO. When you're the VP of marketing, you spend half your time getting the CEO on board with whatever you're trying to do.
Love it.
So fine, new CEO. I don't, we'll see if I can tolerate that. And they said, but we're bringing in a new CEO. And I'm like, okay, who's that? And they said, well, it's Dave Gould. I'm like, oh okay. So I could probably deal with that. Okay. So 8 years later, we sold ourselves. The senior management team, the executives at the time, there were 3 of them. Dave was the CEO of Witness. We sold ourselves to Verint. So I'm sitting at dinner with the CEO and the president of Verint, who, by the way, are still the CEO and president of Verint today. The president of Verint is my boss. I'm sitting at dinner with them at the night where everyone's sort of getting on board, being told what's happening. And the 3 guys who we call the 3 amigos, the CEO, the chief administration officer, and the president of Witness were all retiring at the acquisition. So I'm sitting next to the CEO, and he says to me, you know why you're sitting between the 2 of us? And I'm like, no, I don't know why. And he said, because Dave Gould tells us it's okay for the 3 of them to leave. All we need is you. I'm like, oh awesome.
I love it.
Wonderful. So, it's funny how you have someone, I kind of jokingly say when the person in my life that stood behind me and pushed me to, into traffic and said, I'm sure you can get it to the other side of the road. It was consistently Dave. Now there's other mentors in my career as well, but it is amazing how having someone who's constantly pulling you to the next place or pushing you, is also a big part of a career, no matter who you are, female or male. I think that's a big part of having, the support you need to take the scary next step that sometimes is bigger than you think you can handle, but also probably the next place you should be going.
Absolutely. Wow. What a cool story of synchronicities too with you and Dave. I totally see the power in someone believing in you as he did because he saw you work and helping you take that next step to the next level. I know that's something, at WIT, we're mentoring from all different ages. And in fact, I've also felt like nowadays it's good to have a younger mentor the older people sometimes as well, because then you stay in touch with what's current in that sense. So mentoring in general can be extremely powerful. So let's see. Tell me a little bit more about the engagement piece of what you're doing at Verint. I just want to dig into that a little bit because I just feel like it's such a powerful topic, and with all the data out there, and how do we use that to actually make better customer experiences?
Right. You're exactly right. And really engagement is in two places. It's customer engagement, and then, as you know already in your career, it's employee engagement.
Yeah.
And there's definitely plenty of market research that says that organizations that have engaged employees have better customer satisfaction, better customer engagement, and are more successful. So when the kind of technology that we bring to the table is really focused on making sure that organizations have the tools they need to help customers get the responses and information they need for service. So it started in the call center, which is where service all started back in the day. You had to make a phone call every time you had a question. So a lot of the technology's core is in the call center with telephone calls. But beyond that, it's chats, emails. How do they ensure the quality of those interactions as well? And we moved into bots. So when you go online on a website and you try to have a conversation with someone, you actually can have a conversation with, the bot. Or at the time the virtual assistant is what they call them today. And you type in your question and it goes and finds the answers and brings them back. The sophistication level of that kind of artificial intelligence is amazing. It's matured so much in the last few years. And obviously, as more companies try to provide more self-service technologies on their websites, on their mobile apps, et cetera, so we can find our answers as best we can, what we've left is a call center that gets the really hard questions and the real complex stuff. And employee engagement in the call center is more critical than ever before, because now it's not the simple, quick answer, what's my account balance? Now it's the complex stuff. They've had to raise the level of employee that they have in the contact center. It's got to be more sophisticated than it has. And it's just a more complex job. So a lot of the tools there, you'll see gamification, mobile apps, so they can create their own schedules on their mobile apps. They can shift swap on their mobile apps. A lot of those types of things are finding their way into customer service jobs because people are desperate to keep those employees longer because the knowledge they need is much more sophisticated than what it used to be.
That makes sense. And probably more fulfilling too, because they aren't just reading a script as much. There's much more depth to what level of knowledge they need for that job. And then they have these tools. I love that. I love seeing how, the innovation that's happening in that area, because we all want the answers quickly and nobody wants to wait on hold either. So I think, this is a fabulous area of innovation.
And there's more AI even at the employee. So when the employee's sitting at their desk, now a lot of the repeat tasks that employees don't want to do, you'd be shocked how much when someone answers your question, they actually have to go update 4 different systems behind the scenes.
Oh.
You change your address. It's amazing. Behind the scenes, they may have to go to 4 different places to change your address. Now there's bots that they change the address in the first place and the bot behind the scenes goes and does it in all the other places. So automation and AI, even to help the boredom, like you said, the boring stuff that employees have to do off the table with AI. It's amazing.
Yeah, if you think about that, we've all called in and we're frustrated with whatever our problem is, and you know that the person on the other end is just as frustrated. So
yes, you do. And they're just the messenger, right? In the end,
we
sadly.
like to kill the messenger.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's good. You're kind of creating a much better world for everyone.
Yes.
Okay. So let's, speaking of employee engagement and Verint, do you have an approach, that you want to share about how you're, focusing on diversity and inclusion at your company? Are you proactive in that area?
We are proactive, but I will say that, like you said, a lot of organizations just naturally have the kind of people that they have in terms of leadership roles. And Verint is also the kind of company that has a lot of natural female, both employees and leaders. Yeah. Average technology company has about 20% female. We're over a third female at Verint. Yeah. And we have females in lots of senior roles as well. So creating that role model. And as you said, I do hear from the younger women on a very consistent basis how much they appreciate just seeing me in the role I'm in, and how encouraged they are by the ability to have the kind of career that they want, because they can see that that's very possible, and that it's, they see other people doing it. Yeah. And that does make a difference as well.
So one of the topics we're going to cover in March at the WIT forums is about having a powerful presence. And that's something you definitely have. Do you have any advice or, guidance to share with our audience? And that's male or female, but just, about kind of, I guess I would say, leaning into the leadership power, presence that kind of takes.
I love that. I love the concept, the power of presence, to be honest with you. I think presence is, I think it's huge. Honestly, I do think it's a big part of where people differentiate themselves is with presence. I don't know how much of it's learned and how much of it's innate. I would say for those people who are natural extroverts and maybe have an innate power of presence, I would suggest that you probably will find yourself, if you're young, as you get older, really learning how to contain it. It's almost the other problem. We get too controlling in the conversation or too controlling in the meeting, and not allowing the other people who add just as much value, but don't do it with the kind of, not as comfortable speaking as extrovertly. Yeah. That's not a word. But, as everyone else is, not giving them the opportunity and taking the time to make sure that you get their input and get what they're thinking out, because it takes all kinds to run a business. It can't be all extroverts. It can't be all introverts. Everybody has to work together. So I think power of presence is got two sides. It's got the ones who come by it naturally, and you have to control it, because I think it's one of those things that can, turn a lot of people off if you're too forward and too out there too often. Yeah. And then it's also the people who naturally don't have that, natural instinct to chime in. I see a lot of people when we do a Myers-Briggs who are natural introverts, who I wouldn't have guessed they're natural introverts. So they've figured out how to find a way to get their voice heard and to make sure they have presence, even though it's maybe not their nature. Yes. And that's important, because those are people who are in senior roles that I'm really surprised when I find out they're introverts. I'm like, wow, it's not what I would have expected out of you. So it is important, because you can't sit quietly in a meeting and then expect people to treat you with a lot of, interest and a lot of, respect for what you say if you're just going to sit there in silence. You have to be able to have the confidence to jump in when it's appropriate and make sure you're making your voice heard or helping raise an issue that everyone needs to think about. So it's a really important part of how to be successful, honestly.
I love how you mentioned both sides of that coin. I think, as well, that they're both important. And one of the things I think you pointed to was that, as a leader, holding space for other people is actually really, really important, and not always hogging up all the space, and kind of making sure all the voices are heard. And then on the other flip side of that, if you aren't naturally extroverted, yes, you can learn. And that's actually what we're going to be talking about. Kind of making sure you're paying attention to what your presence is, and, being conscious about that. And you can, in fact, learn, like you said, to, pick up some different skills to make sure that you are, you could be the smartest person in the room, but if you're not kind of engaging, then, they may not get you where you want to go. So yeah. I loved your input on that. Let's see. So, where else should we go today, in our interview? Let's talk about, giving back. Where are some areas that you like to give back in your personal or in your corporate life?
So I think that changes as you get older.
Yeah.
When I had young children, I had to focus my giving back, if you will, totally on making sure that I was focused on their school or something to that effect. Anything that was surrounding them because I was a working woman.
Right.
So I needed to make sure that my focus was, something that engaged my children so that I could spend as much time with them as possible.
Yeah.
I also have spent a lot of time volunteering at my church, as chairman of the church council and on the board at the church.
Yeah.
And then with startup companies. So spending time making sure that either on the board of a startup company or at least mentoring people who are involved in startup companies, because we've seen all spectrums, from what it takes to be a very small company to be a larger one. So we do encourage people to get involved, across the board. But at Verint specifically, we focus on what we call the next generation, which is, ensuring that we're always doing things that are around, children. So we, do backpacks in the summer. We do Angel Tree at Christmas time. Individual teams are encouraged to go out and volunteer in groups that, one of the teams just went to foster care just recently. So we do encourage that across all of Verint because obviously making sure that people understand it's important that the company has a presence, not just as a technology provider, but we're aware of what's going on in our community and we contribute to it. Big part of what needs to happen for sure.
Thank you for doing that. Something that you just touched on, there I want to spend a couple minutes on is, you mentioned your family and being a parent. And we're all trying to juggle so many different things. I've sort of come to the conclusion that there's no such thing as balance. It's kind of, just how do we do all these things? And so how have you approached that over the years, trying to keep all the balls in the air?
So I have some definite opinions about that. I have two boys. They're now 24 and 25.
Yeah.
And I had a working husband who was an executive in a software company as well. And I think I felt, this is a little bit of what not to do, by the way.
Okay.
So lesson learned. I think I felt that I had to prove to my children that they were just as important to me as my job. And so I literally tried to do everything myself. And if there were errands that had to be run, I tried to do them. I tried to do all my work and everything I needed to do at my job. I tried to do everything on the weekends. I was the team mom for the soccer team and so on. And then if somebody needed a ride on Friday night to a party and, they were 15, then, I was the mom that everybody could count on to drive. I think I figured out my husband finally retired a few years ago and I gave him things to do. And I figured out, this man can actually take the shoes into the shoe store to have them repaired. I'm telling you, for 20 years, I never asked him to do any of those things because I felt, enough guilt by being in my job that all the home stuff I had to prove that I could do everything. So use your resources. Don't feel like you have to do everything yourself. Give yourself a break and not a break. I don't mean a break like, go take a bath. Give yourself a mental break.
Right.
Like you don't have to be everything all the time. Other people can do stuff and use it, take advantage of it and don't feel guilty about it. Let yourself off the hook for having to do everything. I wished I'd learned that earlier. I will say, that my children, you learn this from your children's friends when they're in their 20s and their friends are saying, "Oh, I'm so excited to meet you. Your son has said this, that, and the other about you." I do find that both of them have a lot of pride in my career and the things I've done. And that really helps a little bit in the guilt because you do have guilt. No matter what, you're going to have guilt because you definitely spent nights out of town or weren't there for events. But it does help after, when they're in their 20s to see them look back and have such positive, feedback about you as a person and as a parent.
I agree. And there's definitely the guilt factor. I think we all struggle with that. The other thing I've heard other people say as well is that at least, one other thing you can focus on is when you are with them to be there, be present. And that goes a long way. So since we can't be there 100%, make the time count.
And it really does go back to your, volunteering and community work. I mean, you change your priorities. Like, so when they were young, I was on the chairman of the school council. Right. I was in, science on the science team or whatever you did. Yeah. Whatever little bit of time I had for volunteer work was totally focused on children and them specifically and what people were looking for in their world. And as they got older and didn't really want me to be around what they were doing, then I switched my focus to other things. But, and don't feel guilty saying, like I always said, I only can have 3 things I'm doing outside of work, 3 volunteer things. Mm-hmm. And when someone would ask me for the 4th, I would say, nope, until something rolls off, I can't take on another thing. So I had that limit and it helped me. Once I had that limit, I could say, I knew it was easier to say no.
That is a great tip. And I felt that's a great tip in general in life. Once you kind of have this clarity on what your priorities are, then it's easier to be clean cut and say, no, I can say no to that and feel good about saying no. So I think that's a great tip. And also I feel like, the guidance you were just sharing about, your family and how you kind of manage that also works with it's leadership in general. So you can't do everything. You have to build a strong team and delegate. I feel like you basically just said we should do that in our family too.
I never thought of it that way, but you're exactly right. That's exactly what I mean. You're right. It's more delegation.
Yeah. I mean, and you're still a team. You're all working together, but, you don't literally have to do every single thing for your team to function. In fact, your team may function better if you aren't doing every single thing.
You're probably exactly right.
So that should help us all with our guilt factor today. Well, I don't feel too guilty about having all of these incredible women in the workforce since we do, contribute so much to the world, so much to the bottom line. All the research is out there. They need us in the world of business. And so, we should be proud to be at work and our kids are proud of us too for it. So.
And, women in the workforce is kind of the same thing I talked about when I said introverts and extroverts is it takes all kinds, right?
Yeah.
People, in order to be the most successful, make the very best decisions, having a more diverse set of opinions to bring those decisions together just by default will make a better, end result. When they say 2 heads are better than one, that's not just a saying. That's the truth. That's the absolute fact. And sometimes 3 and 4 heads are better than one. Right. So the more diverse opinions you get, the better solution I think you'll end up with.
Definitely correlated to innovation. The more diverse people around the table, whether that's, gender or culture or, any variety of diversity. So, I think, that's just good to remind people. It's not always obvious, but the numbers are there and we know this is true and it is very logical. So, so we have many, many, many reasons to continue to follow our dreams and do contribute our strengths to the world, whatever gender we are or whatever, description we are in a certain culture or whatever that is. So I feel like that's kind of the bottom line. I wanted to see if you wanted to close out our awesome chat here today with any final wisdom or guidance that maybe you've picked up over your career that maybe we didn't touch on or that you just want to emphasize to our audience.
I think that probably more focused on just being you. Think of yourself as a person.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether the color of your skin or your gender or anything or your background, your culture. Just think of yourself as a person with all of the beautiful skills you bring to the table, whatever those are, in whatever career you're trying to get or whatever ambitions you have. And just look forward. We had a speaker one time at one of our user conferences and she did, triathlons, massive triathlons. And she was on this very competitive team and they were at the end of this triathlon. And I guess it's probably not technically a triathlon, but anyway, they were carrying their canoe at the very end. You had to carry it at the very end to get to the finish line. And she kept they were winning and she kept looking behind, turned around looking behind them to see if anybody was catching up or not. Right. And her, the leader of her team looked at her and he grabbed her head and faced it forward and he said, winning is that way. So stop looking back, without saying it, stop looking back. Winning is that way. So take take who you are and don't just think of yourself as a person, not as any particular gender or diverse anything. Just you're a person with the skills you have and look forward. Winning is that way.
I think that is beautiful advice to end on. And thank you so much for sharing it and telling us about your story and journey and what Verint Systems is up to. So, this has been an honor to talk with you today. So thanks for coming by.
And thanks for inviting me.
Great. Well, so that's going to be the end of our interview today, but I do want to make a couple announcements about what's going on next at Women in Technology. I mentioned earlier that next Wednesday, the 19th, is our next WIT forum, which is the Road to the C-Suite. We are sold out, so that's gonna teach you to go ahead and buy your tickets for the March WIT forum, where we will be talking about creating a powerful presence, and we touched on that today and how important that is. So we'll see you in either February or March. And we also have a WIT social on March 4th, so that's going to be at that's Women's History Month, so great reason to get out and socialize with the tech community. And it'll be at Vino Venue at 5:30 on March 4th. So lots of ways to get involved. Of course, you can volunteer with us. And just let's close out with our mission, which is Women in Technology is focused on empowering girls and women to excel in STEAM from the classroom to the boardroom. I hope everyone has a great day.